anybody can use it, so you have no excuse. These tangled spools have been giving me a couple of issues. In this video, we're going to talk about making wall art using CAD. But you don't need any CAD skills. Well, you'll learn some CAD skills maybe. You don't need any previous CAD knowledge. Let's take a look. We've got this wall behind us that's sort of the quintessential YouTuber collage of chaotic artwork and just various things. We decided to fill the wall with things that we were interested in. And we have a lot of stuff on there. For example, I like to collect vinyls. I have a handful of limited presses. I like to collect the ones of albums that I used to listen to a lot of when they came out. So I have a handful of those from various bands. There's also a Gibson guitar neck piece of art that my dad did using barnwood from my grandpa's barn in Wyoming. I've got a leash and collar from my dog Nacho that passed away a little bit ago, so he's always hanging up there with us. There's this beautiful piece of Halo artwork that I found super randomly online. This is an excellent piece that captures the awe that I first felt playing that back in 2001. There's also part of a Mountain Dew box that I just cut up and put up there. So it's not like, there's no depth here. It's just goofy stuff on the wall. Of course, some of my favorite pieces are the one-off printed ones. Beyond the artwork that maybe my dad made me, the most special things are the ones that I made, because you can't just buy it somewhere. There had to be a degree of research or skill or work that went into it, and they look pretty cool on the wall. So, for example, Rise Against is my favorite band. You should listen to all their music, they're pretty great. There's a couple of Rise Against pieces over here. I got one of their vinyls, of course, like we spoke about earlier, and then their logo as well. And I made that one when I first got my Anycubic Cobra Max, because that was the biggest printer I had, and it could make these big pieces. That one's really cool. On that Cobra Max, again, I made this flying Spyro that's up there behind me, because Spyro's awesome. It's all video games or music or guitar. Like, there's not much going on here. Oh, also, of course, the Mountain Dew. Along with the Spyro, the other one that I really like, of course, printed on that big Cobra Max, was this GTA 4 map. It took quite a bit of work to get it to print kinda how I wanted, and I really like how it turned out. The thing about all of these pieces is they're all one-off. You can't go to a garage sale necessarily and pick any of this stuff up. If you could, that would probably be because they manufactured it themselves. There's no way to just go get this stuff. You can have an idea and then turn it into a thing that can be hanging on your wall inside of the same day in a lot of cases, and I think that's really cool. In the case of the GTA map, I had to do a lot of thinking about how I was going to get everything to pop just right. I could do a silhouette of the map, but I didn't have a multicolor solution for that printer. I don't know if there even is one now. There may be. I think Anycubic's working on a new multicolor thing that can go on printers other than the Cobra 3. Maybe we'll look at that later. Regardless, I needed to figure out a way to get all the different layers of this map to pop with one spool of filament. I couldn't even stop this printer halfway through and then change out the spool. So what I decided to do was have the land masses be at one height, alleyways be at another height, and then the main streets be at a third height. Having those three different heights staggered enough allowed me to use a gray gradient PLA. As the lower layers were printed, they'd be printed in one shade of gray. The next layers and the alleys and that sort of thing would be printed in a slightly different shade of gray, hopefully. And then the top layers, so those would be the main streets and things, would be in their own shade of gray as well. It worked out okay. I'm sure I could have tuned the heights slightly differently, so it would have been completely different shades of gray, but, you know, it turned out pretty good. And that said, even if I had the Bambu printers like I do now, I wouldn't probably redo it, because I do have those printers now. I just wouldn't be able to redo it and have it be that big unless I broke it into a lot of different pieces, which would be fine. I had to break this one into pieces, but I don't think it'd be worth breaking it into that many pieces. So I bring all of this up because lately I've been diving into the world of Red Dead Redemption 2. If you're into games, you probably know how good of a game this is. I'll keep this brief. The game came out in 2018. I only just started playing it this past year, which is 2024, so I slept on it. I never wanted to get into it. You know what? It's fantastic. Everybody should play it. So we're going to commemorate this game on the wall with a couple of pieces. Now I hear what you're saying. Keo, why are you filming in your car this week? Now, the icons that I want to print are fairly simple. They're not difficult shapes. For this kind of thing, I like to use Tinkercad. Tinkercad's a free software. Anybody can log on to a browser, go to tinkercad.com, make an account, and use this CAD software. For what it is, it's pretty powerful. It's definitely got its limitations, but for something that's free, this is certainly the way to go if you have a lot more simple models. Oftentimes, I prefer using parametric CAD software. It's a little bit easier to gain control over complex models. But for something with simple shapes like this one's going to do just fine. And anybody can use it, so you have no excuse. Also, I'm filming in my car because my power's been out since yesterday. We had a wicked rain, wind, thunderstorm, tornado situation happen last night, and there were like 80-mile-an-hour winds that were blowing trees over and stuff. So our power's been out since like 6 p.m. last night. It's almost 9 a.m. I drove into work, they said go home, so here we are, boys and girls, filming in the car, bringing you that content. You like that? So for starters, we're gonna throw in a couple of basic shapes. This software is all about using basic shapes to build up your model. Looking at the logo, we've got 3 circles, so we're gonna start with some circles. You do the old copy paste, throw some in there, and even beyond that, there's some pre-populated models, like the heart, for example. That one's just in there. So the first one is a circle with a heart. We've done a circle with a heart. That was pretty easy. This next one wasn't quite as easy, even though it's just kind of a football-shaped sort of thing. I started off by reviewing the model and looking at the shapes that I had available. I figured I was just going to do a circle and then use a triangle to pinch off the ends to give it those points. So we tried that for a bit, and I tried overlapping a couple of circles, turning them into ovals and that sort of thing, just to get the desired shape that I wanted. And it kind of was working, but you can see here, like, the angles aren't super great. It's sort of joined together fine, but it's not quite what we were going for. It's a little bit too pointy. So next I tried looking through the pre-populated stuff. Didn't exactly find anything I needed, so I was gonna move on to plan C, which is messing with some other features you find in Tinkercad. So with most of the models, when you bring it into the build area there, you can adjust different aspects of it. So on this circle that I drug out into an oval, I tried messing with the sides a little bit. You can do the steps of that side, so you can have however many flat edges or make it a higher step value to give it really round edges. And I was hoping maybe that would help me achieve the desired effect here. Again, plan C did not deliver, and we had to kind of figure out a different plan here. The other thing Tinkercad really lets you do, the one thing it does really well, is negative shape modifiers. You can turn something into a hole instead of a shape, and then it allows you to subtract that shape from other shapes. So what I finally landed on and what worked here was plan D, where I took a couple of bites out of some cylinders and overlapped them kind of like a Venn diagram, and using that negative shape modifier, it allowed me to get that shape that I was looking for. I had to go in and make sure everything lined up a little bit, but generally speaking, this worked out pretty excellent. This was exactly what we needed for this shape. Now that I had the main shape achieved, using my negative shape modifiers, we just had to do the internal bits, the little cross deal, the X, whatever you want to call it. So I just used a couple of rectangles and sort of sized them to suit. You'll notice as you bend and stretch and push and pull on these shapes, if you rotate something and then you stretch it and pull it, it's no longer 90-degree angles. So the corners are no longer 90 degrees. It gets stretched into a parallelogram. If that's what you're looking for, that's how you achieve that. For this one, that's not what I was after. I wanted those 90-degree corners to keep everything kind of square and stay a little bit more true to the model. It's not going to be bang on the model, but it's going to be close enough. These kinds of things help it stay close. I wanted to work on that little detail a little bit. You can also notice that one of the weaknesses of this software is it's not super easy to keep things centered. So you've kind of got reference points, but generally speaking, there's no snap to center like you might normally find on other CAD software. So it does take a little bit of fooling around with it to make sure everything stays centered. Similarly, there's no scaling option when you have more complex shapes. So you can drag the corner and sort of scale it that way, but if you want all the proportions of your shape to remain intact and scale the length and the width of it proportionally with each other, there's not a super easy way to do that other than looking at the lengths of the side and then multiplying those values by the same factor. In those ways, this is where you find the limitations of CAD software like this. It's still a really good option for simple shapes like what we're doing here. So just to make sure I have everything lined up and centered, I use this rectangle here and I put it right on the pointy edge to find the center line of our football shape. That allowed me to throw a line across it, see if the X was directly in the center of the shape, and it was. And now we move on to the last one. So reviewing our reference image, the last one we've got to do is kind of a lightning bolt. This is the stamina core. Now, in order to do that lightning bolt, we're just going to take some squares, rectangles, put them all together, and then drag them so they're parallelograms. So kind of like what I was speaking about earlier. If you rotate stuff and then you modify its shape and size, that allows those corners to no longer be square. In this case, that was used to our advantage, so we could get those angles and make the lightning bolt. It took a little bit of moving around and some negative shape modifiers to get the angles just right, but as you can see, it looks pretty good. Now the only thing that's left to do is line everybody up. We need to put the outer ring around the edge, and then we need to see what depths we're gonna have each model be. So I'm thinking the outer ring is gonna be recessed, and then the model itself, so the football shape, the lightning bolt shape, the heart shape, I think is gonna protrude out of that. And then I think the outer ring is gonna also stick up. So I think it's gonna be up, down, up. We'll mess with it a little bit and kind of see. In order to get everything to line up just so, you can adjust the heights of things individually and also change the colors of things individually. I did that in this case to keep myself from getting confused, especially when it came time to do the football shaped one. I wanted to have the X in the middle be recessed at the same level of the middle ring. So in order to do that, I made a negative shape modifier and then another negative shape modifier to recess around the football to keep that center part kind of sunk in. So all that's left to do is join these models, send them to the old slicer, color them up, and then push print. So that's what we're gonna do. If I don't know where to go, or who to turn to, okay, so we've had a couple of things happen. A couple of developments since the last time I recorded. First off, power's back. Excellent. I can finish this video. I can print the things out. You will have something to watch this week. Please watch it this week. The next thing, I printed the first one. It turned out pretty good. The colors are fine. Maybe I could have chose different colors, but we're sticking with them. The filament that I'm using is actually Tangled PLA. If you're not familiar with Tangled PLA, the whole goal of Tangled is to keep the price of filament down and make it less of a product and more of a commodity. Often when you have injection molding or other traditional manufacturing methods, you get plastic pellets, and that's your commodity, and not as much of a product. With 3D printing, we use filament because it's a precise thing that needs to be processed so it can then go into our machines. It needs to be within tolerance, within spec, certain alloys of plastic, so on and so forth. What Slant 3D and Tangled PLA, Tangled Filament, is trying to do is bring filament away from the product range and down to the commodity range. Their goal is to get a kilogram of filament to be $10. They started at 22, I think. It's down to 15. I think it would be really cool to have quality filament that's super consistent from roll to roll, super cheap. Maybe that'll give the other manufacturers a run for their money. So the other thing that Tangled does is sometimes when they're cleaning out the extruder from whatever color it was back to, say, the black, they will have all of this waste filament, the purge filament, that they sell. This filament is called Wonk because it's not consistent. Your spool at the beginning and the spool at the end may be two different colors. So often they sell this quality filament that just looks kind of wonky for cheap. If I don't know where to go, turn to. Now, since the stuff was so cheap, I'm not so worried about making these models a little bit thicker, a little bit chunkier than I might have done with other stuff. In the case of the GTA model, I made that nice and thin because it's a pretty big model. It's going to be thirsty. I don't want to use dollars and dollars and dollars of filament. You want to put forth the effort. You don't want to spare expenses, but there needs to be a little bit of reasonable thought as you go into it. Lucky for me, with this cheap filament that happens to look kind of cool, I can make these nice and chunky. So that's what I did. The first one printed out pretty well. No surprises. Everything was as expected. The colors are a little bit odd. I think it's pretty cool. It'll match the wall. We usually go with a purple and orange theme here. This is like a peach and gray theme. I think they contrast well enough that once they're hanging on the wall, it's gonna look good. When I printed the second one, that's where the problem started. These tangled spools have been giving me a couple of issues. The tangled spools don't fit in the standard AMS because Tangled does this cool thing where you order your 1 kg spool, and instead of weighing out a kilogram of material, they just fill up the spool. Any manufacturer you buy filament from, they're gonna get you a 1 kg spool. What Tangled decided to do was just max out the spool capacity, and so you get way more filament for your buck. They sell it as a kilogram. It's just an entire full spool. It's a lot more than a kilogram. So that's cool. As a result, it does not fit correctly in my AMS, and on the AMS lights, it is so heavy that often they work themselves off of the little spokes that you mount them on. Not a bad problem to have. Your filament's too good a value. That's a terrible problem. I think it's okay. That is why this second one did not finish printing. The spool fell off, the AMS was no longer detecting the filament, and the print was stopped. It's like a 3-hour print, which isn't bad for how big it is and stuff. Like, it goes fast. But at the time I went to go start the third and final print, the second one was only 7% done. The timetable got shifted back a little bit. That happens. That's okay. With that print started, I let it go, printed out the second one, finished off the third one, and we were off to the races. I decided I was going to hang these three right next to each other like you might find them in the game. I was struggling to find a place for them. There's a couple of empty spots, but I think where I decided is going to look pretty well and still leave room for the next thing that I'm going to hang on the wall. Keep your eyes out for that one. I do have a question for you. How do you typically hang things on walls? I like to do the old drill into a stud situation. When you have a collage like we have here, how would you go about hanging them? Most of everything behind me is held up with command strips, but there are some things that are screwed in properly. So what do you guys use? Let me know in the comments. So with that, the wall is more cluttered than ever. Today we talked about how you can make models without CAD experience. You can make something that's one of a kind, nobody else has it. These things can be sentimental to you, they can be personalized to whatever degree you expect, all because you have the ability to create this. You can use simple, free programs that are available. The only limit is what you're willing to invest into it. Let me know what you think about using Tinkercad. Also, what other programs are you guys using? Are they free programs? Do you need a license? Let me know in the comments. I'm planning to do a couple more of these videos where I design things. What kind of stuff would you like to see me outline? The next thing that I'm hanging, I'll probably need to make some mounts for it. They sort of need to be custom because of the angle I want to hold the thing at. So I might make a video on that depending on how well you guys like this one. Let me know if you'd like to see that as well. Otherwise, until next time, thanks for watching. Bye.